Now we're going to talk about the table footer and how to set it up for each of the different table layouts. Okay, so right now this is set up as a column per pattern layout. Yep, and we're pretty much using the same kind of layout that we've used in a few other videos. So if you scroll down in the main configuration form, you have these radio buttons and this option here called Show Footer Row. By default, it is set to no footer. And if we look over at our table, we can see that, yep, we just have table rows, no footer at the bottom. But if you click on any of the other two options, sum, what we should end up seeing is a sum of all the numeric value columns. So, and you'll kind of see an interesting thing over here. Now, if you have a string-based column, it's not going to do anything. It should show you absolutely nothing at the bottom because you're not going to sum or average the multiple strings together. And then average, same thing. It's just going to show you the average at the bottom. The difference between the two is the word average or total. We could certainly add other types of mathematical functions at the bottom, but sum and average are probably going to be the most common ones. We could add things like the difference or delta between the highest and smallest value, max, min, population variance. The list could go on and on. If you guys have any sort of feedback on that and you're interested in other types of footer row calculations, I can certainly do that. I don't think it would be too terrible to add it if there's a need for it. Okay, so this is set up right now as column per pattern. You can see that right now we have average, or we can do sum. But there's a few gotchas that we're going to be aware of here. So right here we have bits received, bits sent, output discards, and interface status. So right away the interface status column is one that I'm like, well, this 10 doesn't really make any sense. Now why are we getting a value of 10 at the bottom in this footer row? Well, it's because interface status is actually stored as a numeric value, a 0 or a 1. 0 for down and 1 for up is my guess. But if we look at that column configuration, and this will be detailed in another video at some point, there's an option called value map display option. The default is display as is, and display as is pretty commonly how you will see a value mapped item displayed in other parts of the Zabbix UI. So now that I set it back to the default, you can see that it's value mapped to the word up, but the value is stored as a 1. And I'm not going to go into why value mapping is important. Read the Zabbix manual for that. But if we were to take all of those 1s and sum them up, we get the value of 10. Now, seeing the average or the sum in this column is really just not something that we want anyway. So what we can do in the column per pattern layout is if we want to adjust the default that we see here at the bottom for any one particular column in column per pattern layout, we can do so by clicking on that particular pattern. So interface status, INTF status, that is going to be this bottom row here. So I'm going to select the edit button. And if we scroll down to the bottom where it says advanced configuration, we expand that. There's an option all the way at the bottom here that says override footer. So no override just means take on the default configuration from the main configuration form, or we can override it to show none, show the sum, or show the average. Right now we have it set to the sum on the main configuration form. So in this particular case, I'm going to set it to none because I don't need to see any sort of mathematical calculation or arithmetic being performed on any of the values for that column. It's just not as useful as it is for the other columns. So seeing 93 total discards, or this is my total rate of bits sent or bits received, that's actually useful. But we can override this last column to none. Now we don't see anything, so it's not as confusing. Now we can do the same thing for any other column as well. Maybe we want to see the the average of the bits sent? Well, we can go to that column, click edit, and we can change it to average. Hit update, and what we should see now is we have 4.4 gigabits per second. That's our average. And we also get this little icon over here. It's not the best looking icon in the world. I probably need to do something a little bit more aesthetically pleasing, like an SVG of some sort, but it's not super critical for me to do that, so I haven't done that yet. But if you hover over it, it tells you why there's an icon there. We see total at the bottom. You assume that this is the total or the sum, but this icon catches your attention, so we see, yeah, okay, this is 4.4 gigabits per second. That's the average of all the values in this column. All right, so that's table footers for the column per pattern layout. It's going to be a little bit different for 3-column. So for 3-column, you don't have the ability to override anything. And why is that? Well, because we would end up conflicting, right? So 3-column layout, the only column that we're really changing here or adding values for with all of these item patterns that I'm highlighting here in the configuration form is this last column where it says value. So it would not make any sense to allow you the flexibility to add multiple item patterns like this and then allow you to override it. So right now it's using the sum. That's what we have selected in the main configuration form. We can set it to average, and it will change it to the average. Also, mixing all these values doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but that's okay for the purpose of this video. Now, if I were to click on any one of these columns and I scroll to the bottom like I did for the previous column per pattern layout, I don't even have the option, right? There's no option down here for overriding the footer like I had mentioned before. So pretty straightforward for 3-column, a little bit more complexity and customization for column per pattern. If we move on to the vertical layout, so vertical layout, again, is items in the first leftmost column with the item name, and then the value for each corresponding host that you have selected in your host groups or host tags, whatever your filters are for the data that's presented inside the table panel. And same thing, so we can't override any of the footer values, much like the 3-column layout. But one of the things that you'll notice here for each one of these columns is we have 4 different items. We have bits received, bits sent, output discards, and status. But what's interesting is at the bottom of this, and right now we're on average, and if I change it to sum in the show footer row, it's the same thing. It's just showing the raw value. So why is it showing the raw value? Well, that's because we have mixed units in here. So the first 2 rows are in bits per second. The 3rd row is, I think, just no units, and then the 4th row is also no units. So when we add or aggregate all those values together, if we detect that there are disparate or different units being used across the different metrics or the different items, then it's going to default to just showing you the raw numeric value. All right, so let's go to horizontal. It's pretty much going to be the same thing here, with the exception of there's no unit mixing. And the reason there's no unit mixing in horizontal layout is your hosts are on the left and each item is a column in the table. So kind of set up, well, because of the filter that I've applied here, I'm only looking at E10/22. It kind of looks like column per pattern, but and it's going to behave very similar to column per pattern, except you don't have the flexibility to customize each one of these. Okay, that has to be done in a column per pattern layout. Okay, so we can go back to no footer, and it should show us nothing. So that's pretty much it for using the table footer. I don't really think there's anything else we can go over for this particular topic right now. There's definitely other things to consider when using the table footer, depending on other options that you've selected, but that's it for this one.